The first knock came when the house was at its quietest. 3 a.m. Winter had pressed itself against the walls all night, snow packed tight against the windows, the wind breathing low and steady like something alive. The heater clicked off. Silence settled, thick, absolute. Then knock, knock, knock. Not loud, not violent, polite. I opened my eyes and didn't move. In winter, sound travels strangely. Wood contracts. Pipes complain. Houses speak when they're cold. That's what I told myself as I stared into the dark, counting my breaths. Knock, knock. 3 again. Same rhythm. Same pause between each one. Too deliberate for the wind. Too patient for coincidence. I reached for my phone. 3:02 a.m. No missed calls. No alerts. No messages. The signal flickered once, then steadied. Everything normal, except my heartbeat, loud enough now that I was sure it could be heard outside. Outside. The thought arrived fully formed, uninvited. I listened. No footsteps crunching in the snow. No engine. No voices. Just the winter pressing in, and that space beyond the door where someone or something stood without moving. Hello. I whispered, hating the way my voice cracked. Silence answered. Long, heavy. Then the doorknob turned. Slowly. Carefully. As if whoever was there already knew it was locked. I sat up, every nerve awake, watching the front door from the hallway shadow. The knocking didn't return. Instead, something softer replaced it, a faint scrape like fingertips testing the wood. And then a voice, so close it seemed to breathe through the door. Please. I know you're awake. That was when I realized. This wasn't the first time it had come. I didn't open the door. I don't know how long I sat there, upright in bed, staring down the hallway while the darkness slowly thinned into shapes I recognized. The coat rack, the picture frame tilted slightly left, the faint glow of snowlight leaking through the front window. The voice never came again. The scraping stopped. By the time morning arrived, the house felt ordinary enough to convince me I'd imagined the worst part. But the cold never left. Winter had locked the town in early that year. Roads narrowed into white corridors. Power flickered without warning. People spoke less, as if the cold had taught them silence. I had moved into the house 3 weeks earlier, telling myself isolation would help me reset. A new job. A clean break. Cheap rent was the only real reason I chose a place so far from the city. The landlord hadn't argued when I asked why it was still vacant in December. People don't like it in winter, he said, eyes sliding away. That was all. The house stood alone at the end of Birch Hollow Road, its porch half buried in snow, its paint peeled down to gray bone. No close neighbors. Just trees. Tall, black, unmoving. At night, the wind threaded through them and made a sound like distant breathing. I told myself the knocking was stress, or sleep paralysis, or a dream that borrowed too much from waking life. Still, I checked the door. No footprints. No marks. No sign anyone had been there. The snow lay smooth and untouched, like it had never learned how to hold weight. That should have frightened me more than footprints ever could have. Work kept me distracted during the day. The hardware store stayed busy through winter storms, and exhaustion has a way of dulling fear. By evening, though, the house reclaimed my attention. It creaked as it cooled. The walls ticked and shifted. The silence pressed harder after midnight. At 2:59 a.m., I woke without knowing why. My eyes opened to darkness, heart already racing, as if my body had remembered something my mind refused to hold. 3 a.m. Knock, knock, knock. The sound came from the front door again. Same rhythm, same restraint. 3 knocks. A pause long enough to feel intentional. I didn't move this time. I didn't speak. I lay there, counting seconds, listening to the winter breathe outside. Every instinct screamed not to acknowledge it. The knocks came again, softer now, almost apologetic. Then stopped. Minutes passed. Maybe longer. When silence finally settled, it felt incomplete, like something was waiting for permission. The next morning, I asked around. At the store, I mentioned the noise casually, like it was nothing more than an annoyance. "Probably kids," someone said without looking up. Another man laughed once, too sharply. "No kids out that way," he muttered. "Not after dark." An older woman at the register paused when I said the time. "3, she asked. "Yes." Her fingers tightened on the counter. "You didn't open the door." It wasn't a question. "No," I said. She nodded slowly. "Good." That was the moment the room felt smaller. The lights buzzed. No one else spoke. Later, I found myself driving past the local cemetery on my way home. The road narrowed by snowbanks higher than the hood of my car. The gate stood open. Wind dragged loose snow across the headstones, erasing footprints that weren't there. I couldn't explain why I stopped. The caretaker was out there, bundled in a heavy coat, brushing snow from a marker with slow, practiced movements. He looked up as I approached, eyes pale and unreadable. "You live on Birch Hollow," he said before I could speak. "Yes." "You hear it yet?" My mouth felt dry. "Hear what?" He studied me for a long moment, then gestured toward the ground. "The knocking." I laughed weakly. "It's just a house noise." He shook his head. "Houses don't knock." The wind rose suddenly, rattling bare branches overhead. "It comes when winter is settled," he went on. "When the ground's too hard to take anyone new." "That doesn't make sense." "It doesn't have to," he said. "You answer it, though. That's when it learns you." A long silence followed. Snow whispered across stone. "What does it want?" I asked. The caretaker turned back to his work. "To be let in." That night, I locked every door, checked every window twice. I left the lights on in the hallway, the living room, the kitchen, small islands of safety against the dark. At 2:58 a.m., the power went out. The house plunged into darkness so complete it felt physical, like a hand over my eyes. My phone lit up the room in pale blue as I checked the time. 2:59 a.m. I held my breath. 3 a.m. The knock came from inside the house. 3 taps. Right behind my bedroom door. A voice followed, low and familiar, using my name like it had always known how. "I'm cold," it whispered. I didn't sleep after that. I sat upright until dawn with my back against the headboard, eyes fixed on the bedroom door. The lights never came back on. The heater stayed dead. The house cooled into something brittle and hollow, each minute tightening around me like a closing fist. There were no more knocks. No more whispers. That was worse. Morning arrived thin and gray, light bleeding through the curtains without warmth. When I finally opened the door, the hallway stood empty. No marks on the wood. No sign anyone or anything had been there. Still, the air felt disturbed, as if it had been moved through. I told myself the voice had been a trick of fear, lack of sleep, stress. The caretaker's words replaying in my head until they dressed themselves up as something supernatural. Fear has a way of borrowing familiar sounds, familiar tones. But fear doesn't know your name. At work, my hands shook enough that a coworker noticed. "You look like hell," Mark said, sliding a box of nails across the counter. "You sick?" "Just not sleeping," I replied. He hesitated. "You on Birch Hollow, right?" I looked up. "Yeah." Mark lowered his voice. "You ever hear knocking at night?" The words landed harder than they should have. "Who told you that?" I asked. "No one." He shrugged, eyes darting toward the store entrance. "Just, my uncle lived out there. Said winter got strange. Said people came to the door when they shouldn't." People. He didn't answer immediately. Then, quieter. He moved out after the 3rd winter. "What happened?" Mark shook his head. He stopped answering questions. That night, I searched the town's history. The internet was slow, but old news archives loaded eventually. I learned Birch Hollow Road hadn't always been empty. Decades ago, houses lined it. Small family homes built cheap and close together. The winter of 1983 changed that. A storm hit early. Relentless. Weeks of snow without thaw. Power outages stretched into days. Then longer. One by one, People disappeared from Birch Hollow. Some were found later, frozen within sight of their own doors. Others were never found at all. The articles were careful with language. Exposure, disorientation, tragic circumstances. No mention of knocking. No mention of voices. Just one detail that appeared again and again. Time of death estimated between 3 o'clock and 3:15 a.m. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark, listening to the house cool around me. That was when I heard it. Not a knock but movement. Soft, measured, as if someone were walking barefoot across wood floors, careful not to be heard. The sound came from the living room. I didn't move. The footsteps stopped just outside my door. Silence pressed in. Thick. Intent. Then a whisper barely louder than breath. You didn't answer. I don't remember screaming. I only remember the sound of my own voice breaking the silence and the way the footsteps retreated. Not in panic but disappointment. The next day, I went back to the cemetery. The caretaker was there again, same coat, same slow movements. He didn't look surprised to see me. It came inside, I said. He nodded. That's what happens when it's learned you. What is it? He brushed snow from another marker. People ask that every winter. And it doesn't matter. I grabbed his arm. It used my voice. It sounded like me. He finally looked at me then. Really looked. It always does, he said. It wears whatever makes the door easiest to open. What happens if I let it in? His mouth tightened. You don't let it in. That's not an answer. He pulled free of my grip. Once, the people on Birch Hollow believed the knocking was mercy. Lost travelers. Neighbors in need. Winter teaches you to listen for suffering. So they opened the doors. Yes. And winter didn't give them back. That night, the house changed. Objects weren't where I left them. Chairs angled slightly toward the door. The hallway mirror showed my reflection a fraction of a second too late. When I turned faucets on, the water ran cold no matter how long I waited. At 2:57 a.m., I woke to whispering. Not words at first. Just breathy sounds slipping through the walls, threading together like a conversation held too softly to understand. I pressed my ear to the plaster and felt vibration beneath my skin. At 2:59, the whispering stopped. 3 knocks followed. Not at the door. From the walls. The sound traveled. Knock, knock, knock. Moving through the house as if testing it. From the living room. The kitchen. The hallway. Each set precise. Controlled. Patient. Please, I said aloud, not sure who I was speaking to. Just stop. The reply came instantly, overlapping my voice. Open. I fled the house before dawn and didn't return until daylight forced the shadows back into their corners. I packed a bag, telling myself I'd leave for a few days. A motel. A friend's couch. Anywhere with other people. As I stepped onto the porch, I noticed the snow. Footprints covered it. Dozens of them. Bare feet. Leading up to the door. Leading away from it. Circling the house in tight overlapping paths. As if something had walked there all night waiting. None of the prints crossed the threshold. Yet, that evening, my phone rang at 2:58 a.m. No caller ID. I didn't answer. The voicemail arrived seconds later. Static. Wind. Then my own voice, tired and shaking. I'm outside. I'm freezing. Please let me in. At 3 a.m., the knocking returned. Louder this time. Closer. And this time it didn't stop. By the 4th night, I was no longer certain what house I lived in. Walls felt thinner. The floorboards sharper underfoot. Shadows lingered in corners that sunlight could never touch, stretching just beyond my vision. Every object, chairs, lamps, even the fridge, was slightly out of place, angled toward the door as though listening. I barricaded myself in the bedroom, furniture shoved against the door, phone in hand, notes scribbled in a frenzy. Times, patterns, whispers, names I'd never heard aloud, but that haunted me anyway. Every knock from the walls or floor sent my heartbeat spiking into my throat. I barely slept. I barely ate. 3 a.m. The first knock hit the wood with unbearable precision. Knock, knock, knock. Each tap pressed into my skull like a command. My phone vibrated. Another voicemail. This time, my own voice again. Let me in. You know you want to. I hurled the phone across the room. The glass shattered. A cold, wet mist curled out from it, crawling across the floor, licking at my ankles. The smell, earth and decay, damp winter soil, filled the room. I gagged. I thought I heard laughter. A whisper. No, several, layered, overlapping, coming from everywhere and nowhere. My own name echoed back to me in tones I couldn't recognize. High, low, pleading, mocking. I scrambled for the door. The barricade was gone. Chairs stacked in neat piles. Lamps twisted to face me. The door creaked slowly, deliberately, as if breathing. My hands shook as I reached for the knob. The first shadow appeared. A figure in the doorway. Tall, featureless, pale as frost. Behind it, movement. Shapes multiplied, stretching from the hallway into the walls themselves. My reflection in the hallway mirror rippled, delayed, showing me twice. Once me, wide-eyed, shaking, and once, something else. Mouth stretched in a silent scream. Fingers elongated and grasping at the air. Open, the whispers pressed in unison, louder now, around me, behind me, inside me. Open. I bolted. Hallway, living room, kitchen. Every door I tried was locked, except one. The basement. I descended into darkness, the steps creaking like bones, the air wet, smelling of earth and rot. My flashlight cut through the gloom in thin slices. At the bottom, a mound of snow, impossibly inside, covered the concrete floor. Footprints led across it. Bare feet again, but now with a trail of something darker, thicker. Then it spoke. Not a whisper. A roar that rattled the walls. You invited us in. And now it's too late. I turned. The walls were moving. Slowly, impossibly. They breathed in rhythm with the knocks. Shapes oozed from the corners, crawling along the floor, pressing against me, and then the basement door slammed shut. Darkness wrapped around me like a living thing. My own screams were swallowed before they left my throat. I fell backward into the snow-covered floor. Fingers, pale, cold, impossibly long, traced patterns on my arms and face, and every voice I'd heard over the last nights whispered again. We've been waiting for you. Panic surged, heat and ice battling in my veins. I stumbled blindly through the snow, the shadows merging into one enormous presence. I realized then that the knocking had never been an invitation. It had been a warning. And I was too late. The basement walls pulsed with movement, stretching, warping. Time itself warped. My watch spun wildly, minute hands spinning backward, forward, then stopping. I reached for the door. I had to escape. My fingers grazed the wood. It was solid, then soft, then wet, then gone. And in its place, only whispers. Welcome home. I realized, with a dread so deep it rooted itself in my chest, that I wasn't running from the knocking. I was running with it. And it would never stop. The house was quiet afterward. Not normal quiet. Not the quiet of snow settling or wind whispering through trees. It was hollow waiting, the kind of silence that feels like the air itself is pulled back to watch. I stumbled upstairs from the basement, every floorboard groaning under me, and reached my bedroom. Nothing moved. The snow had vanished from the basement, leaving only cold concrete. The shadows had receded, or perhaps they were patient now, biding time. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. Days blurred. I left food on the counter, lights on in the hallways, hoping someone, or something, would not notice my absence from the house. But the knocking never returned. At least, not in the way it had before. The townspeople noticed my absence. Friends called, worried. I ignored them. I didn't need anyone's concern. I had learned what mattered. Presence or attention made no difference. The entity, or whatever it was, didn't rely on recognition. It was patient, eternal. I walked the streets of town in the afternoons, avoiding Birch Hollow Road. Snowbanked roads, bare trees, the hollowed houses of families long gone. People spoke quietly, eyes downcast. I sensed the knowledge in them, buried under polite conversation, that some doors are not meant to be opened, that some voices cannot be resisted. At night, I returned to the house. Lights on. Doors locked. Windows sealed. But I never stayed past 2:59 a.m. The knocking had taught me to respect time, to measure the minutes that mattered. The caretaker's warning echoed constantly. Once it learns you, you cannot unlearn it. Over the following weeks, subtle changes crept into my life. Mirrors occasionally reflected movements behind me that weren't there. A chair out of place. A whisper, low, almost unintelligible, brushing the walls. I could feel it everywhere, a presence just beyond perception, patient and knowing. One morning, I found a mark on the inside of my front door. 3 knuckles pressed into the wood, pale and frostbitten. I didn't touch it. I didn't paint over it. I left it there, a reminder. A promise. The knocking is still coming. Not every night. Not always exactly at 3. But it comes, persistent, patient, never-ending. I've learned to ignore it. Sleep lightly. Leave the lights on. Never answer the door. Winter comes early now. Nights stretch longer. The cold presses in against the house like it knows. And I sit, watching shadows grow, feeling that it waits just beyond the walls, beyond time, beyond comprehension. Sometimes I hear a faint sound, a single tap on the wood, like a polite request. My name, whispered just out of reach. I stare at the door, frozen, listening. The snow drifts outside. The wind holds its breath. And I remember what the caretaker said. You didn't answer the first time, and now it knows you. And it will never leave. I do not answer. Not anymore. The last sound I hear before sleep, or whatever passes for it, is not a knock. It is a whisper carried through the walls, patient, low, and inevitable. We are here, always. Outside, the snow falls. Inside, the shadows stretch. And the house waits. I am alone. And yet, I am never truly alone.